The New York Giants announced their decision on Monday morning to keep head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen. Giants did that quickly, more quickly than a lot of people anticipated. The news had been that that decision might not come down until late day Monday or early Tuesday. And here to discuss that news with me on the Valentine's Views podcast is Big Blue Views Tony Del Genio. Good morning, Tony. And it seems like we just did this.
Good morning, Ed. Yeah, hasn't been long.
We did the
I
show
did
last
get sleep.
night. So I saw you rubbing your eyes there when you came. I wasn't too sure how much
I,
sleep
I'm
you
still
got,
I'm
but
still not fully awake at this time of the morning.
yeah, well, it is what it is. And honestly, for me, not a big shock that the Giants decided to go this way. Um, it seemed like it was trending that way. Everybody knows, that this is the decision that I favored. At least anybody that's been listening to the show or reading my work knows that this is the decision that I wanted to see the Giants make. Um, just your initial thoughts this morning in hearing the news, Tony.
So I'm of two minds about the decision. I'm not shocked by it because I think that I mean we never really get to hear from Steve Tisch. Okay, so it seems like almost everything kind of we see is through the eyes of John Mara, and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes between him and Steve Tisch. But you know that John Mara, I think, craves continuity on the Giants, and he does not like the fact that he's had to make so many changes in the last few years, I'm sure. And so you have to believe that he was inclined toward keeping them both. And I think the things that make me uncomfortable, and I like that, and I love the hires of Shane and Daboll when they were made back in 2022, and so they're not a GM and coach that I have disliked ever since they've gotten here, and I believe that both of them know a lot about football and have some of the right theories at least about what constitutes winning football. So in that sense, I feel comfortable with them doing this. The side that makes me uncomfortable, of course, is not just the results. The results by themselves obviously are very disconcerting. The question in my mind is, what do they think about the results, and what do they think they've been doing wrong? And we don't know because I think they'll never say for public consumption what they think they're doing wrong because that necessarily involves kind of trashing your players, at least some of your players. Okay, and I think neither of them is inclined to do that. Not every head coach and GM are like that. Some are willing to make candid statements about their players, but I don't think these two are. They try to withhold information like that. So we don't know what they think they did wrong, and depending on what they think they did wrong, then this is either a good thing or a bad thing. If they really think that they're just on the right track and can continue what they're doing, then I'm not happy about that. But if they've taken a sober look at how they got into this position and said, maybe I need to do this instead of that, maybe I need to not go into a season with a porous defensive line, excuse me, porous offensive line and a weak interior defensive line. The offensive line they did improve over last year, so I can't complain about that. The defensive line, we know that Shane traded Leonard Williams, and I thought that was the right move at the right time, and I thought he got good value in return for that. But then he never really replaced him in the interior, and you can't go into a season not having made a move to replace a player like that. Likewise in the quarterback position, you lose Tyrod Taylor, and you don't really bring in viable backup quarterbacks, knowing that you might be in a situation next year where you might have to move on from Daniel Jones at the break. And so there are questions in my mind about how Shane decides to constitute a roster and so on, how he approaches some of his contract negotiating and things like that that make me uncomfortable. And I don't, I don't know. Likewise with Daboll, how Daboll interacts with his staff obviously has been a big question along the way. And so, have both of them taken a sober look at themselves and decided what they need to change, and have they come up with the right answers for that? That's what we don't know.
As you said, we don't know. The only thing but we're going to get a chance to find out. Uh, for me, it's clear. It's been clear both guys have made mistakes, and something that you and I have talked about repeatedly is in terms of those biggest mistakes. What turned out to be Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones specifically. Although we saw Hard Knocks, we just don't know what the conversations were like behind the scenes. We don't know exactly. We don't know exactly in the Saquon Barkley case, for example. I've said repeatedly, in the first time they negotiated, they were within $2 million, I think, in overall money. If John Mara, and I know John loved Saquon, but if John Mara was really of the mind that this franchise had to have Saquon Barkley, he could have easily said to Joe Schoen, just give him the $2 million and be done with it. The last time they negotiated, Saquon basically ended up with the same deal in Philly, money-wise, or very close to the same deal that the Giants had offered him in total value, 3 years and whatever it was 30 some odd $1 million. The primary difference was in guaranteed money. He got 26 million in guaranteed money from the Eagles. The Giants had offered him 19 million in guaranteed money. And what I had seen reported at the time is Saquon would have said yes to the Giants if they simply bumped the guaranteed money up to 24 or 25 million dollars. And John Mara could have easily said, let's just do that. Let's get it done. Let's keep Saquon here. He didn't do that, which tells you that there is at least part of John Mara that was fine with the decision to move on. So I find it hard to hold Joe Schoen's feet to the fire for a decision that you could have changed and chose not to change. So, so that's how I feel about that. But overall, what we find out going forward is, have Joe and Brian learned anything from the mistakes that they have made? And it's an unusual thing for an NFL franchise to do, to actually give a regime an opportunity to grow and learn and overcome its mistakes. Unusual thing, maybe a Giants like thing, maybe a thing that only the Giants would do, but that's where we are. Can they learn and grow? We'll find out.
Yeah, and of course, the Giants have done this in the past, right? Sometimes even despite their own intentions, right? They wound up keeping Bill Parcells after a disastrous year when all the rumors were that they were going after Howard Schnellenberger, right? Instead, and they wound up keeping Parcells, and that worked out. Tom Coughlin was not in a great position after 3 years, despite getting them to the playoffs for 2 years, because the players largely didn't like him very much, and they could have changed course then either, and they didn't, and that worked out well too. So there are examples sometimes of being patient with head coaches, and they manage to do better and give you something in return. Obviously, well, I don't think you can say that this general manager and head coach are in any worse position than George Young and Bill Parcells were after the 1983 season. I think both of them were, in terms of how much credibility they had, right? They were both coming off disasters. They'd both been to the playoffs once and then gotten worse instead of better. And Parcells was not even the head coach when they went to the playoffs. So, it's not an unprecedented thing to do. It's maybe uncommon in today's NFL where we're more inclined toward instant gratification. But as you say, I think next year will really be telling, not just with the record, because the record is a matter of a lot of different things. The Giants would not have been 3-14 this year if they hadn't had so many injuries, especially on the defense, right? And when you lose Dexter Lawrence for the almost half the season, when you lose Andrew Thomas for about half the season on offense, those things are going to be hurt because you can't really replace those guys very well, and a bunch of other people, right? I mean, in the secondary, they were mixing and matching almost every week, just trying to find bodies to put out there to start for them, and so a record is not really the right way to look at it. It's really the overall quality of the roster and how it was assembled, and those are the questions I think that we have to look for next season to see, have they learned a lesson about some of the things that they didn't tend to and might have been able to tend to.
I do think, Tony, given this decision by John Mara and Steve Tisch, both guys have 2 years left on their contracts. I would expect that the next 2 years, especially this offseason, and thinking of it as a 2-year decision, I would expect to see a very aggressive attitude by the Giants in going out and trying to add more talent to this roster and trying to find the quarterback that they want. And along those lines, this morning when I heard this decision, I was actually putting my grandson on the school bus this morning, hopped in my car, was going to head to the grocery store, and I got ESPN radio on, and they're talking about, like 2 minutes earlier, John Mara had released the statement saying that Joe and Dabes were going to stay. And they had a very interesting theory, and I told you I was going to throw something at you, and this is the last thing we'll talk about because I want to keep this a fairly quick show. Chris Canty, Evan Cohen on ESPN radio threw out the theory that the Giants, sitting at number 3 in the draft, considering this decision, that there's pretty much no chance they'll draft a quarterback number 3 in the draft, which I found very interesting. I do tend to think they won't force it. They won't draft that guy unless it's Cam Ward and they're absolutely in love with him, or if they're absolutely in love with Shedeur Sanders. I do tend to wonder if the theory is going to be draft Travis Hunter or use the number 3 overall pick to trade down and get as many pieces as you can, and then get a quarterback on day 2. Get Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, whoever they like, whoever's available, sort of using your just draft somebody theory that you posted, this morning on Big Blue View. And we have 4.5 months to debate this and discuss it. But just quickly, your reaction to the idea of, as badly as they need a quarterback, not taking that quarterback at number 3, if that ends up being the plan.
So I can't agree that there's no chance that they're going to do that. The part of this that we don't know the answer to is, what do they actually think of those 2 top-ranked quarterbacks? Mm-hmm. And I think the prevailing opinion out there is that those 2 guys, Sanders and Ward, in whichever order you place them, are certainly not the equal of the guys who went 1, 2, 3 in this year's draft. And I think everybody seems to be of a similar mind about those 2 quarterbacks, that you cannot compare them to Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or Drake May, right? And what a lot of people have said is that they are near the next crop of 3 guys, although not necessarily quite as good as the next crop of 3 guys that were drafted this year. I read in one place somebody say that if J.J. McCarthy was in this year's draft, he would be the first quarterback taken above either Ward or Sanders. So you don't know what opinion they have about that. My opinion is, and again, I know less. I haven't watched film extensively. I've watched film as a fan on TV with other people, but I like what I see of Cam Ward. Do I think he's worth using the number 3 pick on? I'm not. I'm.
I
I'm
love
not.
that. That says a lot.
I'm not sure. Uh, you know, and certainly if the Giants are sitting there at number 3 and Ward and Sanders are gone, then you're faced with this fascinating question of, do you go with Travis Hunter, who certainly seems like the best player available in this draft at any position, or do you make a trade down and get some really good assets in return? I could imagine, moving down from number 3 to number 4 or 5, and then sitting there at number 5, and you take a guy like Mason Graham and you put him next to Dexter Lawrence in the middle of your defensive line, and you say, okay, problem solved.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So there's some fascinating things you can do with that. Again, if you put me in the room on draft day today, and they're sitting at number 3 and Cam Ward is still there, I think I take Cam Ward, because I think I see a ton of upside in him, and I think I see lots of interesting traits in him, and I might be willing to roll the dice on him being able to kind of reach that ceiling. I'm more queasy about Shedeur Sanders and wonder whether the things that I don't like about him are things that can easily be fixed. So I think that's the question for me. And then the other question is, do you just take Travis Hunter and get yourself one hell of a player who seemingly helps solve your CB1 problem? Plus, you can on a selection of plays put him next to on the opposite side next to Malik Neighbors on passing plays, and then you've got a pretty dynamic duo. That would be hard to pass up.
Yes, you're taking a player and a half there, basically.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating debate, Tony. We will talk about it a ton over the next 4.5 months. I think I'm going to wrap this up here, folks. If you haven't had a chance to do that, if you haven't seen it, stop over at bigblueview.com, vote in our poll about what you think of the decision that the Giants made today. And as always, please support the channel, like and subscribe. And as always, please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.